All right, folks, welcome back for another show. Wanted to welcome my next guest, who is an amazing MC who has been a longtime staple in rap. He started rapping in the 90s, has blessed us with a catalog that dates back to 99 with his first album, Life First, Half the Battle. With his upcoming Kept Safe Collection project that is due for a February release. But hey, his fan base knows that when you hear his music, it is very evident that he puts his heart and soul into his writing. I wanted to welcome the legendary Christian rap recording artist Braille to the show. How are you, brother?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Thank you for having me, bro.
Yeah, hey, it's an honor, man. Longtime fan. And hey, man, real quick, did you guys do anything for the new year to bring it in? Just was it family or just you guys go out? What you guys do?
Yeah, we do what we call New York New Year's. So we're on Pacific Standard Time, but 9 p.m. we say it's a new year, bro. So yeah, we had some friends over. Honestly, we sung some hymns, prayed, and then kicked it. We ended up kicking it till like 10:30, but that worked out well.
I love you. You had a post where you summarized the year in 4 words, which I love: family, food, ministry, and music. Well said. It was a great year. Was 2024 good for you?
Man, I explain it. I've been explaining it at least as, sometimes at the end of the year, you're like, man, that went by so fast.
Yeah.
2024, nah, man. January 2024 feels like a long way away.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
there was a lot packed. So I don't even necessarily think of things in terms of, was it a good year? Was it a bad year?
Sure.
Years are different, and there's ways in which you're growing through it, so on and so forth. But it was a year of swimming in the deep end is the way I would just describe it, where there were a lot of new situations. Again, not necessarily bad or good, but just where I was wading in deep waters, either to help somebody else or an opportunity or something. And so, yeah, I was just really stretched, and I think in a lot of good ways. But yeah, it was a heavy or a weighty year, is the way I would put it.
Yeah. Hey, well said. Definitely a period of learning. It's funny that you mentioned the January 2024 being a long month. I always have this running joke where the year goes quick, but that first month feels like 3, 4 months, and then
Yeah.
before the year is like over. Well said. Do you mind telling us where you were born, where you were raised, and what your
Yeah, man.
introduction to rap
So,
was?
yeah, born and raised in Portland, Oregon. I've traveled a lot, but the majority of my life I've been in Portland. There was a little stint after high school. I mean, during high school, where I lived in New Jersey,
Yep.
and then there was also a stint after high school where I lived in California, both some time in LA and some
Oh
time
wow.
in San Marcos. There was another period of time for like 6 months where I lived in Washington, D.C. But I would say,
Yep.
a cumulative, maybe it's like 5 years outside of Portland, but
Okay.
like, 38 years in Portland. So in terms of music, I mean, I got like a one track mind kind of personality. So if I'm into something, I want to do it. So
Ah.
when I was watching WWF, I wanted to go wrestle, and then when I
Awesome.
was watching NBA, I wanted to shoot hoops. And then, in the very, very early 90s, I'm talking like, 91, 92,
Oh wow.
some of that era of like the garage band kind of,
Yeah.
Green Day, Offspring, things like that. I was like, okay, I kind of like this. I was buying some of the t-shirts, and I had a friend who could play guitar. I couldn't really play any instruments. I tried to sing or write songs, and I'm like, man, what I could only get so far into it because
Yeah.
it wasn't a natural way for me to express myself. Like literally when I would watch basketball on TV, the
Yeah.
second halftime comes, I'm outside shooting hoops, right? Because watching it makes me want to do it.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of exposure to, early. I mean, I would dance along with MC Hammer or
Yeah. Yeah.
crisscross stuff like that.
Uh,
But there was this period of time where Columbia Music, they would give these little guides and you'd get tapes and stuff. And so I got
yeah.
got the Tribe Called Quest Midnight Marauders tape,
Okay.
in 93, somewhere between 93, 94,
Yeah.
uh, in terms of when I got it. And that was where a light bulb went off, where I heard people rapping, but stuff that I felt like I could express myself in a similar way, because living on the West Coast, a lot of my exposure to, say, gangster rap, things like that, I didn't know how to express it. Even aside from MC Hammer, MC Hammer, Kid and Play, like I knew the party rap, but I wasn't really inspired to do it other than to maybe dance along with it, right? But in terms of what I would do vocally. But then when I heard the more chill styles of Tribe Called Quest, I was like, oh, okay. They're just talking about their life, talking about making music, and that just set a trajectory for me. Plus, if you remember the cover for Midnight Marauders, they had all these different artists' faces. And so reading on the inside, it was like this introduction to both older artists and newer artists. And so I was building my tape collection at the start based on the various faces that were on the Midnight Marauders cover.
Yeah. Hey, you have a great song too. I think it might be on the Shades of Grey album, where you talk about that too, and how, you hate that, immediately when you say you rap, you immediately associate it with gangster rap, but hey, it's not the way I go. And and I see that you're, on many stories, that you're very influenced by Tribe Called Quest, and I love the positive vibe and the messaging and the just emotional music you write, man. So that makes a lot of sense. Have you ever seen them live at all?
Nah, I never got to. I did. I saw De La Soul multiple times, even opened for De La Soul multiple times. But Tribe Called Quest wasn't really, by the time I was super active, they weren't active anymore. Because if you remember, Fife and Q-Tip kind of had a period of time where they had beef with one another. And then, Fife passed away. So, I never saw them live, nor, opened for them. But the closest I got to that was, opening for De La Soul, I think on 3 different occasions. So
hey, I know you're a well-traveled guy when it comes to music, and we'll talk about that James Brown thing too as well, and just phenomenal career, man. Aside from Tribe Called Quest, I'm curious, any other MC or project that kind of sticks out that is key in the development of the MC that you became?
So because one thing that's maybe different about Tribe Called Quest, and when I just developed my style, I was a lot more aggressive than really the way you would say a Fife or a Q-Tip raps.
Good point.
So Q-Tip having that more nasally tone, and Fife kind of more chill with the punchlines. I never really ended up rapping like them. So really, they inspired me in that I could just talk about normal things.
Right.
But then I would say it was a combination of, I think probably it started with some of the getting access to some of the Wake Up Show tapes and things like that. That got me on the trajectory of getting into underground hip hop. And so probably by like 96, I was getting exposed to a lot of the independent underground, battle rap tapes and stuff like that. So whether it was Chino XL or whether it was, Saphir, who recently passed away, his album Boxcar Sessions. Ooh. What I really liked about, say, a Saphir, a Chino XL, and again, this would be also different than Tribe Called Quest, is they didn't rhyme their bars just at the end, so it wasn't like, here, I'm on the rap and now I'm going to go and take a nap. It was what most of Saphir's writing, it was a lot of internal rhymes. You hear something similar with, say, Ghostface. He does a lot of internal rhymes, and it's okay if the end of the bars don't rhyme. And that always made a lot of sense to me, because when I expressed myself, I didn't like the idea of confining my emotions to a symmetrical rhyme structure. I really liked the idea of asymmetrical rhymes, internal rhymes that trick the ear. So I feel like you're rhyming the whole time, but if you look at it on a piece of paper, the rhyming words are in different places. Now, if you trace a lot of that, Rakim gets a lot of credit for doing a lot of his internal rhymes and stuff, but I wouldn't say he was a primary influence for me, because I came a little late. So even though I listened to him around that time, it wasn't as influential for me. Plus, his tempo was more of a b-boy tempo, right?
Yeah.
But and then I would even point to say like Company Flow, Fun Crusher Plus.
Oh wow!
As a huge influence. I remember listening to that in high school, and just the creative, abstract,
that's right,
that aspect really started resonating with me. Even going back to like Jedi Mind Trick's very first album. He was a little less street on that first record, and it was more kind of at least for me. This is what's funny is when I was listening to these MCs, because me being in high school, a lot of them, they would have been like college age.
That's right, a little older.
Yeah, so their vocabulary was a little bit further than mine, as well as their awareness of history and things like that. So when I imagined them in my mind, they didn't even look like normal humans. You know what I mean? They had this like superhero kind of, or their voice. It's like, yo, I've never heard somebody with a voice like that, because I'm just talking to kids, teenagers. And so it's funny when you get older and you realize, oh, that's just a normal person. That's just a normal voice, and they probably even really didn't even know that much about history. They just, about, a Greco-Roman, whatever. And I was like, what are they talking about? They sounded way more educated. You listen back now and you're like, oh, they were just having fun. They probably heard that in a class and, whatever. But so a lot of that stuff, I think it was both the aggressive, battle rap kind of stuff. Even though I wasn't a battle rapper, I liked the aggression of a battle rap type flow. That influenced me. And then things that were imaginative, so using imagery and things like that in lyrics. I found that really fascinating. And then couple that with the internal rhyme schemes. That just was a natural thing that I gravitated towards. And that kind of became the combination of my style, which was, an aggressive delivery, internal rhymes, and very kind of vivid or pictorial in the way I used language.
I really like the comparison you made to Icon, the verbal hologram. You guys are both very lyrical. You rap multisyllabic, and just your delivery. I mean, he's a little more aggressive, but the delivery, I could see the inspiration behind that. That's great. And it's funny you mentioned too. When I first got to those guys, same thing. Just thought they were superhuman, man. And I feel the same way too when I listen to Shades of Grey. And I know your first album, you were only 17 years old, but how old were you when Shades of Grey came out?
Yeah, so Shades of Grey, I mean, I was probably making that around like 22.
That's crazy, man.
23 years old. And and that's also coming up in Portland, so it was at that time, it was pretty rare to have Portland artists making a record, especially as an underground artist. That was that professional, for lack of a better term,
Yeah, it's got a nice story about it that I'd like to talk about eventually, but just, man, the guest and the beats, and just, it was a well-assembled album. So, man, congratulations to you for just putting down a hip-hop classic. So I've seen many stories that you used to go by Reflection, Braille Brizzy, and then now eventually Braille. What is the story behind your name? So I do know, but I'd love to hear from you personally.
Yeah, I mean, my very first rap name was Quake. So sometimes I say that in interviews, sometimes I don't, because I mentioned having the background in like WWF wrestling and stuff.
Oh, so nice.
I made this like imaginary rap crew where my friends who didn't rap, and I mean, I'm talking late middle school, maybe early high school. So I've got this like imaginary crew. They're real people, but they don't Quake and Aftershock and DJ Richter Scale, and it's just hilarious. But then once I was on the Tribe, thing where I started and eventually getting into more of the underground rap and being more, I guess you would say, I guess my lyrics started having more depth to them. That's when I started going by Reflection. And transition, and probably because also a big transition that happened for me. So if I started rapping like somewhere late 93, 94, when I started messing around with it, it wasn't till long, a year or so after that when I became a Christian. And so that's when the word I was looking for, I couldn't find it because it's so close to reflection, but introspective is what I would say. That's when my lyrics started becoming more introspective when I became a believer. So reflection, felt like a fitting name, but then I became aware of eternal reflection or whatever, Talib Kweli and High Tech's group. And so I was like, reflection, if there's a group called Eternal Reflection, I'm coming out as reflection. That's probably not going to go super well. So, and then I was really on the abstract tip, right? So that's when I was going by, Perplex, the Celebration, Bizarre, Perplex for the mind, Braille for the soul, Braille, the suction cup ohm. I was just like, messing with these things. And eventually, and really, really quickly, by like age 16, I landed on Braille.
Oh man, very young age.
Yeah. Very, very young because, by the time, by the time Life first came out, I would have been, if that came out in 99, depending on what month, I was 17.
Right.
I was between 16 and 17 when I made that album. So,
wild, man.
That I was going by Braille by then.
Oh, fantastic, man. It stood the test of time. Awesome. Yeah. A lot of life things in between that. But real quick, I wanted to help you just promote your album or your project, Kept Safe Collection, that's getting ready to come out in February. Does it have a date yet, or is that still to be determined?
Yeah, like February 21st, I think, is the official date.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, man, thanks for the advance and support of this interview. But just made one amazing cover that was produced by Esteban Shed. Any special meaning behind that sailboat on the front cover on why you chose that?
Yeah. We were going back and forth on some imagery, and part of, as I was like putting together the collection and trying to think through like what would be a good summary for the best of. And there's a song, it's funny because it's not on there, so it's kind of ironic, but it's a song that'll come out later that's called Kept Safe, but there's like a chant, broken, beaten, kept safe. Yeah. And that just kind of seems like, in some ways, a summary of my lived experience, but also like, as I survey my catalog, it's like, dude, at any stage when these songs were made, like it could have just been done, right? Both in terms of done faith, done making music. There's just so many bumps and bruises along. But the idea of Kept Safe is, it's like there was some like grit on my end, but I think like more so than just grit on my end, the Kept Safe is just reflecting like God preserving me through various, seasons of life. And so that imagery, it's like you have this very fragile sailboat, the torn sail with the patches, it's surrounded by waves. And it's like, this thing is a weak vessel. There's no way it's going to survive on this storm on its own, but then there's a rock under it kind of holding it up, and so that's just kind of some imagery to try and put an emotional component even to the best of, instead of like a picture of me like, yo, here's my my Jim Croce picture or whatever. But
hey, you had I've seen a lot of pictures of you over the years, and you got some hair back in the day, man. So yeah. I like the nice and tight look. But hey,
it grew out. Yeah, it would look hilarious.
Man, so happy to have this in my collection as well. And just, man, I love the songs that you curated for this album. And just, I wanted to quickly just go into each track. Just, first one, Everything Changed on side A by Rel McCoy. And I'm big when it comes to lyrics. And I just love, one line I wanted to point out: yesterday's mistakes are today's excuses. And man, any special thoughts on that song? Or just, I know you did that in 2006, but any special memory attached to that?
Yeah, one big thing is, so when I was making Box of Rhymes, it was a real interesting situation. So without getting ahead, speaking to the James Brown situation, I was being managed by the same company that was managing him. So they wanted me to make an album that was sample free from a management perspective, because they felt they could do stuff with it on the publishing end. At the same time, there was this company that was connected with Universal Records in Japan called Handcuts. they wanted the album to kind of be jazzy. So I've got one relationship who kind of wants more jazzy, wants more musical. I got another relationship where they want the record to be sample free. Then I've got my own kind of, where am I in life? What am I trying to talk about? And, you know, so the Japan version of the album was kind of all over the place, and I just didn't feel like it was complete. So then when I wanted to make the US version, I removed a couple songs and made a couple new songs. And Everything Changed was one of the new songs that I made that I was like, forget sample free, forget jazzy, like what kind of music do I just make? And Rel had sent me that beat. Yeah. And when I heard it and the little sample with the Everything Changes, like, I don't care if it's a sample, like I make underground rap music, you know what I mean? But so it just kind of came out, and it was, you know, different songs, they kind of, they summarize a time in your life. And in that, it was like, point. I got all these different personal ambitions. Other people have ambitions for me. And really, it's like, that's where I'm just telling myself, don't forget when everything changed. Don't forget the thing that made you who you are. And that's, so it was like, it was just emoting. And I think, you know, along the way, when you make music for a living, it's really hard because when you start out making music, at least for me, the way I came up, I wasn't making music to make a living. I was making music because that's just what I did. That's how I in my time. You gave me an option. You can do whatever you want today. I'm going to make music, right? So that's just what I did. But then all of a sudden, it's your career. You got shows. You've got other people counting on you. And at the same time, you just want to make music, you know, like, and you, like, I don't necessarily have all these, you know, professional goals of how successful I'm going to be. I just enjoy making music. And so that song was just me kind of pouring out some of the tensions that I was feeling and reminding myself, what is this about for me? You know, how do I stay grounded? Don't forget when you met the Lord, and all that mattered was you know, doing what was right before him.
Yeah, I just felt like, you know, as I went through the entire project, that I got to know you a little more deeply. And I love your reference of, you know, this big flex where I'm able to stand on the rock and not the sinking sand. Yeah, it was just, you know, a very, very good diary to who Braille was. Just like, again, man, second track, the IV from 2008. I mean, you are a legend itself, but to do a song with Marco Polo with cuts with Rob Swift, oh man, get out of here! That's crazy. Just the hook, the scratch hook, you know, IV, take my name in vain. But did you pick that, or was that Rob Swift? And how was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, if you even on Shades of Grey, Rob Swift was doing my cuts, and so there was some point where I got connected with him.
Yeah.
And I would send him songs and he would send back cuts. And we just ended up having a really good working relationship between Shades of Grey. He was on Shades of Grey. He might not have been on Box of Rhymes, but then he was on the IV. He was also on Cloud 19 on a song called Hard Rock. And so a lot of times when I would work with DJs, I would at least have one phrase I would throw at them.
Yeah.
But Rob, he was kind of like an encyclopedia kind of, you know, he just knows his stuff. And so, you know, even if I had no suggestion, I'm pretty sure on the IV, you know, and this is, you know, it's wild when you think about it, some of these things, because, you know, this is where we're like sending stuff in the mail, you know, like sending sessions in the mail, you know, so the fact that he nailed it to the degree that he did, when it's like, I'm working on this album called the IV, he don't really live in my head, or he doesn't understand that, but he's able to take those associations where it's like, oh yeah. Cause I mean, the way he takes the LL Cool J, you know, and when he was counting down, it's just, it's real dope. But yeah, even connecting with Marco, I mean, this was pretty early in Marco becoming known. I mean, one of the things like in my career, a lot of times I would just end up, working with a producer right on the cusp before, you know, they took off, right?
Wow.
You know, so you got Ninth Wonder on Shades
of,
you know, he'll tell stories of like, I was one of the first dudes from outside of his circle that bought a beat from him, you know.
That's crazy. That's amazing.
But yeah, so one of my dreams was always to work with DJ Premier, like most rappers, right?
Yeah, right.
You know, Marco was a student of DJ Premier, and yet Marco had his own style. And so the IV beat was like, this is the closest I've gotten to a DJ Premier, you know, style beat. And so that combination of the beat that Marco made and the cuts from Rob Swift, I was like, yeah, it's not a DJ Premier record, but it definitely has that influence. And
absolutely.
Yeah,
it has that signature Marco Polo sound. You know, just his drums, the way it hits. I thought it was a phenomenal song, man. Hostiles to Hostiles, man. Jeez, all day. That was a great song. And that's crazy. And you mentioned too that you guys were doing stuff on mail. So, and also these days, you know, you can just Google something and you find the lyrics. But that dude must have just had that in his head.
It was a different time in the creative process where we'd be going back and forth on email, and but you know, you were working with people who took their craft really serious. You know? And I think it was like, all right, you know, I'm putting my name on this, so I'm gonna go for it, you know. And even at that time, what's funny is like, I mean, I think it was 3 tracks I bought from Marco. I only ended up recording on one of them because the way the IV album worked out, I didn't use one producer for 2 songs on any song on the album. So there was a different producer on every song. I don't know. I was just different times where I get real wild and ambitious like that. So then I had leftover tracks, and then I just never ended up using them just because, you know, things move so quick. I think the next project I did was Cloud 19. It was all produced by S1. So I'd go from like an album that only has one producer on it to like an album where every song has a different producer. And I never really stuck to the same formula. And so there's a lot of times where things would just fall to the wayside as I took up the next, you know, creative endeavor, or the next wave of inspiration.
Yeah. Hey, and I meant to ask you earlier before we went into this. I mean, you performed on the biggest stages. I mean, for work, you do a lot of public speaking. Do you recall your first experience just rapping in front of a crowd? And was that nerve-wracking, or how was that experience?
Yeah, I mean, the first time I performed that I can remember, so I grew up in Portland, but there was a show in Eugene, and I had met these other dudes, and so there was a show, and I think I had one verse within a set with like this crew. So I got up on stage, I did my one verse, but there were this other crew that was in town from the Seattle area. And they're like, yo, we're going to have this like cypher, you know, thing during our set. You should come up and do a verse. I went on their set and I just kicked the same verse that I did in the previous set the same night. It's like, this is the verse I practiced, you know? I just remember, you know, with my personality, even though I would have a verse memorized, if you told me I was about to rap it, I'd get off in the corner by myself and I would rap it in the most distracting kind of thing and see like, if I'm distracted by other things, but I could still rap it and not mess up, that tells me I got it. So then, even though I just perform it, you know, with one crew, then it's like, you know, 40 minutes later, I'm about to perform it again. I'm off in the corner practicing the same verse that I just did on the same stage, you know? So that was just kind of always.
That's great.
If I'm about to perform, I'm in my head more so than I'm like hanging out, and I'm just like going over things. And I never really, I wouldn't say that I really liked performing or being in front of a crowd. My goal typically was to represent my songs the best that I was able to, and to read the room at least well enough that I didn't, you know, get booed or make a fool out of myself or whatever, right? So I never really, my goal was never, let me tear the roof off of this place, because I didn't really think like, I'm not that kind of artist. Like already I knew when I stepped on the stage, in most scenarios, people were looking at me like, who is this dude and what is he about to do? And instead of like, yo, I'm going to show them, I'm like, they're kind of right. Who is this dude and what is he about to do? You know what I mean? Like, I agree with you. Like, I'm not here to convince you I'm the greatest in the world or anything like that, but like, I'll just share with you what I do have, you know? And that was more my mentality, is just to share sincerely, you know, and share authentically. I never really was like necessarily hyped to go on stage. I was always more, all right, am I ready? Do I got my raps down? You know what I mean? Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, and you clued into this, but it's a good segue into the third track, Skeptical, where you mentioned that you are sometimes your own worst critic.
Yeah,
and so, man, it just that's some great lines. Just, I put my heart and soul in every syllable. It's hard not to take it personal when critics aren't feeling you. I start to get critical back instead of being constructive, looking to retaliating attack. I'm my own worst critic. Oh man, 2009, long time ago, but your pen was already hot, man. And just, man, any special memories along with that song, or why you wrote that song?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things. So S1, since IV had all the different producers, that's when I first connected with S1 and we made the song Blessed Man. It was interesting because at the time, I think his wife had mentioned like, yo, a lot of people seem to be rocking with that. You know, you should work more with Braille. And so me and S1 were going back and forth. He's like, yeah, let's do a project. I was really, you know, this is before he had worked with Kanye, you know, things like that, you know, so another situation where like I kind of caught a wave right before it, you know, but you know, me and him toured together and everything. And man, he was like, he was a homie, man. I really, really enjoyed it. But I remember around that time I was on MySpace, and some of the ways I would tour, bro. I mean, I'd be pulling up to like an open mic type situation or like a hip hop night. I mean, again, this is a different era, bro. Such a different era where it's like I could get booked, say in Denver, and it's not like a headline ticketed show, but it's more like it's a hip hop night. And the more people that come through the door, that's going to influence how much you're going to get paid. Right. Sure. And so it's their normal hip hop night. They have a normal like sense of what's their overhead. But then if that artist draws out more people than normal, that artist is going to get a bump in, you know, payout based on that. You know, so I'd be promoting shows sometimes on MySpace. Yo, I'm going to be in this town, whatever. And somebody hit me up on MySpace, like, man, you're always promoting yourself and da 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 da. And they're, you know, they're kind of, and I'm like, man, that's where I'm talking about. Don't confuse my hard work for greed, right? It's not fair. I'm talking about that where it's like, I'm just trying to work, make a living as an artist, make an honest living. And so, but then the idea of, I really don't blame you for being skeptical, you know, of what are people's motives? What are people's intentions?
Right.
Because we all run into the fact that we've been hurt, disappointed by people. And so that was kind of what that was, people aren't always who they claim to be. Things aren't always what they seem. I don't blame you for being skeptical, but at the same time, if we just live our lives as like skeptics of everything, we're going to miss out on like beautiful relationships and many opportunities to experience things. And so, you know, skepticism in some ways is reasonable, but in another sense, too much of it is going to get in the way of being able to benefit from a lot of things that are, you know, that actually are what they appear to be.
Yeah, that's right. And I wanted to close with this line. Just you know, you mentioned that almost to a point where like, should I still even be doing this? But if one person says I'm gifted, who am I to let this die? Right? It's very motivational to that other person, one thing I wanted to credit you to was your beat choice. You're very good at picking beats for your tracks. Are you very picky when it comes to, you know, picking beats and when you get a beat pack, or what's your process?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of old school too, right? I think because I don't even know how people get tracks these days, you know, but I mean, you know, back then somebody would literally send me, a beat CD with like 20, 30, snippets on it. And so, the process of picking a beat, all of that. And so I would often, I would go through, by the time I was on an album where that album, say, has, 14, 15 songs, and I probably went through 500 some beats before getting to that, because all of my work was long distance, it wasn't until much later that I had opportunities to work with people in person, just again, because of the way I came up. But yeah, I think a lot of it, what I learned over time is the beat and what the song is about need to match. And there's a lot of people, they've got really good lyrics, or they may have a good ear for beats, but sometimes they don't match the two, right? Like
that's great.
The lyrics don't seem to match the beat. And so for me, I may be going through a beat CD. Like I remember when S1 sent me the beat CD that had Blessed Man on it, there were a few like bangers, like in a more traditional sense.
Yeah, boom bap style.
Yeah, where I was like, oh, yeah. But then I was just sitting at the time, my daughter, I mean, she probably was like 1 year old or whatever, and she's sitting in her high chair or whatever, and that beat's playing, and I'm like, this fits me, my life, what I want to communicate. And so what fits, right? That was, I think, what I would often gravitate towards is, does this fit? Does it make sense with who I am, what I want to say, where I'm at in life? And so there's a lot of real dope tracks that would come my way that I maybe didn't end up doing anything to, because it just didn't fit. And so I think that's something that I always strived for, is, does the concept and the words fit with the music?
Yeah, very, very calculated. And I'm going to jump into the next song, which is my favorite song of the project. It's a song you did in 2010, produced by Big Jess, Resurrect Me. Woo! Okay. And as you mentioned, man, the beat and the lyrics have to be tied together to get your point across. I thought, man, that one was crazy. So resurrect me, or won't you resurrect? I think I'm dead, and if I'm not dying, bring me back to life again. Oh man, holy cow. That's my song right there. Holy cow.
Dope. Yeah. Big Jess was from this group called the Unknown Prophets in Minnesota. And they featured me on a song. And I was like, yo, I'm kind of curious what else. I don't know. We started going back and forth. And so he just started sending me beats. And again, sometimes you just catch people when they're hot and you're both like going. So he did most of the production on the album that song was from, Weaponade. Okay. But yeah, I mean, that the piano beat like came just right at the right time, where like, what was going on. I'm not like telling a story or making something up. I'm literally just kind of expressing that moment in life. So it's crazy hearing other people react or resonate with it, because it's like, in one sense, it's harder for me to relate with it, because that I really related with it, obviously, when I wrote it. Like, that's 2010, probably between 2009, 2010, but that's 14 years ago. That is like
timeless, man.
That is my heart in that moment, where it's like, I can't really relive it. I can just know that was what I was, that's really where I was at. But if I was to emote today,
different person.
I'm in a different season of life. That would come out. But I mean, I remember, for how real that song was for me. I remember when I first recorded it, and I was sitting somewhere listening back to it with headphones on, and it was like legit listening to my own music with tears in my eyes. Like, dude, I can't believe I'm communicating this. And again, it's for me, it wasn't, is it dope? It's like, it was much more like, does this get across what I'm trying to communicate, or what I'm actually experiencing right now? And yeah, that song just unquestionably kind of captured, the thing I was experiencing at that time.
Yeah. And like, was there ever any doubt in terms of like, hey man, I'm probably giving too much of myself to the people, or was it just always I'm gonna let you know how I feel, whether it be strong or weak. I want you to know the truth. What was your opinion on that? Or was that not even a thought in your head?
You know, so I didn't really have a filter, especially in my 20s, for better or for worse. I think as life keeps going, what ends up happening is, you know, I feel this today. I think it would be, my life is so wrapped up and entangled with so many other people where I'm like, I don't feel the same level of freedom, for better or for worse. I think it's probably for better, because, you know, you don't need to necessarily be sharing everything that you're going through with other people, because it's not just my story. That's what's weird about being an artist. Your story intertwines with other people's stories, right?
Great point.
So it's like, I could be telling you something about my mom, but like, does my mom want you hearing me talk about that? You know, or like, I could be going through something with a friend, but does my friend, you know, or am I about to say something on record that I haven't said to the person, you know, that this is how they made me feel? Like, I'm telling everybody else, but have I told the person, you know? And so, you know, again, starting as a teenager when I was writing, like my rhyme book was like my diary, right? This was me just expressing. And before you know it, you have an audience and you're expressing yourself, but like people are listening to you, you know? And so I think there is some self-awareness, especially after making Weapon Aid, where it's like, I was writing a record, you know, while in the process of eventually going through a divorce. And it's just like, dude, am I going to continue being this vulnerable as I rebuild my life?
Sure.
In some sense, that's why after Native Lungs 2011, I started with the group Beautiful Eulogy, where it was like, I don't know in this season if I just want to be processing out loud the rebuilding of my life. I want to take my creative kind of gifts and ways of expressing and maybe express what I'm learning instead of, you know, just personal processing or personal venting. So yeah, that's been an interesting thing as I've grown as a person. Man, I translate that as an artist without, and now being a pastor, bro, it's like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm like, my life is intertwined with like 115 other people plus
great point.
I mean, stuff. It's like, am I just going to vent, you know, about people that I'm choosing to serve? Like, am I going to tell their story without their permission? Nah, you know, so it's there's a restraint that I think has happened as I've gotten older, but I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a respect thing, right? It's a respect for others.
I agree. And your ability to communicate and draw a picture is just always on point. We go to number 5, Feel It, produced by Evidence and scratches by the legendary DJ Revolution, as well as Evidence. But scratches were on point. You feel it like Braille. And then here's just a snippet of the song, man, that I wanted to mention. I let the cat out the bag. My life was getting hard. It's still raining cats and dogs on the boulevard of broken dreams, chasing after light beams, staying close to my shadow, keep the enemies close. Again, amazing picture that I draw. Any special thoughts or just stories about that song? That's a great track too as well.
The what was wild there, I was on a radio show in Seattle. There was a dude, DJ Hyphen, and he had like a hip hop show, and it was like on a pretty big station. When I came up, when someone said they were doing a freestyle, it wasn't just I'm kicking a verse that I've pre-written, but I haven't kicked it over this beat before. Like a freestyle was like off the top, right? And so I was on the radio show, and around that time, it was becoming more and more common for people's freestyles on the radio to just be a verse that they had, you know, chilling on the side, which I have no beef with that. But nonetheless, just me being old school the way I was, when I was on the radio show and it was going to do a freestyle, like
off the top,
you know, it was off the top.
Wow.
And that when the video of that came out, Evidence had seen it and like commented on the video or reached out to me. And so that was when we had first connected. And, you know, it was a situation where I did connect with him when I was at a real difficult transitional kind of time in life. But he ended up sending that beat that he made. And so I wrote to it. And, you know, And even then, because on Native Lungs, actually, yeah, I forgot about that because I said it ended with Cloud 19, but Rob Swift cut on some other songs on Native Lungs as well. He was on a song called The New Raw. But, you know, I hit up Evidence and I was like, man, I want to make sure that this is a record, not just that I'm happy with, but that he's happy with. So I was asking him, hey, I'm going to probably get cuts on this. Do you have any recommendations? He's like, yo, let's get Revolution. I'm like, bro, if you're game, I'm game. But then he also was, I was like, who do you usually have mix your stuff? And he was like, well, Eddie Sancho is who you should reach out to. And Eddie Sancho was like the, you know, going back to like D&D studios and Gangstar stuff and everything like that. So Eddie Sancho, who engineered the track, is kind of a legend in his own right as well. Yeah. But again, I wanted to do it right. Yeah. And yeah, so that was just like this little window where I happened to connect with Evidence, but then got connected to some other people through him. Yeah. And you know, that was right at the end. I mean, since Native Lungs was my last solo album, I kind of just disappeared from that. But even telling that story earlier of wanting to work with DJ Premier, that was like the closest. Now I was working with an engineer that was connected to, you know, I was like, man, I'm very close to like some of my younger hip hop aspirations. And yet I'm also in such a transition of life that I may end up going a different direction anyway.
Fantastic song. And you mentioned too, so you talked a little bit about mixing, reaching out, but I saw that you were credited for mixing some of your tracks. Are you an audio engineer? Are you self-taught or did you go to school for it?
Yeah. So when we get to the Humble Beast era, where we were doing other artists. So I was an A&R for a long time. Like, if you go to
I had no idea.
The Hip Hop is Music catalog, I ran a record label, and there's a lot of records that I was an A&R for. But what started happening is, again, I'm coming from this older era. Now we're in a new, and Humble Beast were making albums, and we didn't really have the budget to afford engineers that were going to put in the kind of time that was needed to shape these records. And so I started learning it. I want to say, man, must have been somewhere around 2012, 2013. I started, it was really after Native Lungs, because Native Lungs, it started getting really expensive because something was wrong. Like, I'm aiming for such a high bar, and yet I'm like hiring people, doing things. And if something doesn't turn out, it's like, I don't know why it hasn't turned out the way I want it to. I just know it's not what I want. And so I was like, I got to learn this so that both I learn the vocabulary, but also so that I can bring things to the finish line. And so I started mixing other people's albums and became really active in that. And it helped me transition to where my livelihood wasn't just tours and my own albums, but now I could take on clients and mix other people's records and stuff like that as well. So yeah, I got into that and I ended up loving it, man. I wish I would have got into engineering even earlier, because that, seeing the vision through is just something that I always loved. But you know, you can only wear so many hats at the same time. I found that once I learned engineering, it became harder for my own music, because it's like, dang, I'm going to pick out the beat, I'm going to write the rap, I'm going to record it, I'm going to arrange it, I'm going to mix it, I'm going to get it mastered. It's too many hats to wear for your own stuff. But when I'm doing it for someone else, I really love it. It's like, all right, let's take this raw material and shape it into something.
But you're not to a point where you will not let anybody else mix your vocals, right? You're still good outsourcing.
I mean, if I do like a guest verse or whatever, when I send somebody my vocals, they could pretty much keep it as is. I send them, you know, close to mixed vocals. And in a lot of cases, depending on how much the person knows what they're doing, sometimes I'm like, you know, but I'm real easygoing, to tell you the truth. I'm real easygoing. I like to just meet people where they're at. And if they're happy, I'm happy, especially if it's a feature or whatever. But I do need to, if I'm going to be productive again, musically, I need to find another engineer and just trust them to do their stuff. And like, as long as I like the song, because I don't have the bandwidth to wear as many hats as sometimes I try and wear, you know, just realize it's all time consuming. And I don't mix even as much as I used to. And so then when I sit down and mix, it's like I'm not in the rhythm. So if somebody mixes full time and then they're in that headspace, they can hear the song with fresh ears and add new life to it. It's really hard for me to add new life to a song that I've already been sitting with for so long, you know?
So many dope songs on that record, and I'm excited for that to get out. But sometimes, like, people just have large catalogs, you never get to hear everybody's entire catalog. But I thought it was just an amazing selection of songs, and man, there's so many songs I want to talk to you about. But let me pick this one real quick. On the other side, there was a song that I really enjoyed, "The Hard Way." You know, hey, the scratch, I learned the hard way. But your verse on here, "Ambition in my belly, so I take a bigger bite than I can chew. But now it's too late to spit out my food, swallow my pride, take the bitter pill when I feel hypercritical and hypocritical combined. A bad combination, birds of a feather, way afraid of heights, so they never elevator fly." Woo, man. Man, stays hot, man. And man, how hard was it to pick those 12 songs for that project? Was it easier than it sounded, or was it
so the first thing, so honestly, man, like I put away most of my catalog. It was kind of locked up and just set aside. Like I hadn't paid attention to it for a while, because I went through a season of rebuilding my life, and you just change so much. And so it's like it's too close. It was too close to like be able to appreciate it or think about it nostalgically. And so once I got this far away from it, when I started building my own record collection, I would run into different, artists where it's like, okay, because I got like 2 crates worth of records where, when I was younger, I would just buy records for the purpose of sampling, not really for like listening to albums. But then I was like, man, it'd be cool to share this with my kids, whatever. So I got a turntable set up at the house and started building a record collection. But, you find certain artists, and when they got a deep catalog, say somebody like a James Taylor, Al Green, I mentioned Jim Croce earlier, where it's like, man, they got like anywhere from 5 to like 7, 12 albums. And it's like, man, there's a handful of songs on each of those albums I want, but not necessarily like, I don't want to have 12, Al Green albums.
Right.
So I'm like, let me put on this one for Stay Together. So his greatest hits on vinyl, Al Green's greatest hits is a really good example early on of a really well done best of collection.
Sure.
And I realized like, man, we don't do that a lot in hip hop. It's not as common. And I was just like, once I did Shades of Grey on vinyl, I was like, dude, I don't think I'm going to go back and do all of my solo albums, the whole album on vinyl. A, would just be a daunting process, but also B, I don't know if there would be an equal demand for each album because they all lived in their own space, in their own era, and so things have moved on. But I'm like, if I could curate a best of collection where it's like, man, even if you never heard those other albums, this combination of songs is a good distilling of my sound and some of the themes that I did. And so, I just went back and I listened through every album that I made, and I narrowed down the top 3 songs that I thought could potentially fit.
Okay.
And then I started seeing, based on those songs, what ones fit together, what ones were maybe too similar to each other, what ones were different enough but fit. And then I also went to Spotify and I looked at the albums and I saw like, okay, what are the songs that people have resonated with the most? And for the most part, what was interesting is I don't think any of the, most played songs, they ever surprised me. I was like, oh yeah, kind of the top songs that I was looking at from that project also seemed to be the top songs that people go back to. And so there was like some synergy there where I was like, I think I kind of agree with my core audience, where it's like, this is some of his best stuff, this is what we go back to. I'm like, if I was going to go back to my stuff, I'd probably go back to a lot of the same stuff as well. And so it was just it was kind of a fun process of me discovering like, what do I like the most, what do other people like the most, and how could that kind of connect, and then put in a playlist and just rearranging to be like what flows into what, so that the whole thing feels cohesive and tells a story. And so that's just, that was kind of the process. So I would just kind of pick at it, until I finally like, okay, I think I'm ready to bring this to mastering and actually print this on vinyl. It felt ambitious, but it also felt in the end, like, instead of trying to promote, hey, listen to all these albums I've made, it's like, man, best of collection. Like, this is a good introduction to my music if you've never heard my stuff before, but it's also a reintroduction for people who kind of like, they forgot about it or they moved on. And I was like, if I'm going to start being active again, let me concentrate down, like, okay, what's the foundation I'm building on? I'm going to build off of this best of collection and let this kind of be a standard that I want to build off of, instead of any of the one individual albums. It's a more holistic representation of my output.
Yeah, I saw it as a resume, and just again, it reminded me how amazing you are, and just why I loved your music in the first place. And I look forward to people getting an opportunity to pick this album, and it's a great project, and really thank you for the advanced listen in preparation for this interview. Congratulations on hitting 20 years on the Shades of Grey album that you released in 2004. And, as I was doing the research, it has a nice story that's attached to it. You can validate it or not, but talked about, before recording this album, just, you were working with your wife, make money off of the shows that, that you were performing at. Before you recorded that project, you saved enough money to put this album together, and as you mentioned, collaborated with Ninth Wonder, Rob Swift. But how accurate is that story in terms of
there's pieces of it that are absolutely true, because the last full-time job that I worked was literally 1990, maybe early in 2000. I didn't graduate high school, but during high school I worked at a coffee shop, and that's the last time that I had like a job where I was paid. I did do odd jobs after high school, but eventually did put all of our stuff in storage, and would just run around and do shows and slang merch for gas money and sleep on floors and stuff. And Shades of Grey was really the turning point. Somehow I thought about it is like, I knew a lot of people who would go to college and they would go in debt in order to, build their career. And so I was like, well, I don't really have the ability to go in debt because I don't have a credit card or something I'm going to do this with. But what if I just like, lower my expenses as low as I possibly can, and just hit the road and at least try and break even.
Amazing.
And that was just, getting the experience, actually like being in front of people at different places, just learning, rapping every day like that, where it just becomes more and more natural. You're getting those 10,000 hours, in. So all of that was just kind of building up. So then when I was ready to make Shades of Grey, I was like, okay, I want to make like the best album I possibly can, And so I just was pulling like all eggs in one basket kind of situation, 22-year-old. And it's like that album really like opened the doors for a bunch of things. The reason I ended up opening for James Brown was Shades of Grey. The reason music really became a career for me was because of Shades of Grey. So many things, like I was just slanging them out the trunk, shipping them to Australia, doing a thing with, distribution in Japan, this, that, the next thing. But it was like, it just kind of opened my mind to the possibility. But I was very like hunkered down on that album. Like, many songs, there'd be like 6 versions before I finally got the version where I was like, okay, that's the right version of this song, and it was kind of the accumulative, all these years making stuff on digital 8 tracks and 4 tracks and stuff. It was like the first time I could make like a real professional sounding album, at least for the time. And so, it was kind of whatever it takes to get this done. It was like all in kind of investment. And so it's kind of fun to look back on that and be like, all right, I'm glad, I did that when I was that young.
Yeah. I'm glad you repressed the CD, man. I can only imagine folks trying to buy the original copy of that album, and I'm sure it goes for hundreds of bucks on eBay or whatever the case may be.
Depends on which one. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, pleasant surprise that you did that, and I'm happy I own this. But now that I think about it, I'm like, I'd rather have that album on vinyl. And, you're very select when you buy vinyl for your collection, and that one definitely, man, very vinyl worthy. And any hip hop collectors collect. So, yeah, hey, great story. And you keyed in as that album creating opportunities, and you mentioned that you got to open for James Brown. And just real quick, can you touch on that, on how that experience was, and how long was that run?
Yeah. So I mentioned MySpace earlier. There was this website called Pure Volume, which came out, which was like, even though my specific, I don't even know if you would call it social media. I don't know. You just had music profiles and stuff. But what was wild, I made my profile on there and like put on my songs and stuff. And I remember at this time in life, I was trying to learn how to be more professional. Finally went from like having a 1-bedroom apartment to having like a 2-bedroom apartment where the second bedroom was an office. I remember getting like a printer and stuff. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try and be more professional. And so I make this Pure Volume page, and Pure Volume featured me as a featured artist on the front page. And so that got like 100,000 hits, like just mad people were going to my profile. But within that, there was somebody who was in the office of Intrigue Music Management, which was the company that managed James Brown.
Yeah.
Just one of the employees kind of discovered my music, and he started showing it to this guy. His name's Super Frank. He's this Jewish guy who owned private airlines. And he ended up being kind of the guy that James Brown trusted with his career towards the end of his life. And so I get this invitation, so now I'm, maybe 23, 24. I get this invitation to go to New York just to meet the Intrigue management team. So I wanted to meet James Brown, but like they had credibility because they managed James Brown. So I'm like, all right, I'll go. And so they say like, come and just perform for us in the office. And so I fly into New York. I bring a DJ with me. They got this office building. It's in the same building where like Martha Stewart has her offices and stuff. And this big cement room. And they got like this little PA system, and the staff is just sitting there. My DJ hooks his stuff up. I'm just standing on the floor, like, this open space performing for the employees. I'm like, I don't know. This is what they asked me to do. Right. And so I figured like maybe they might ask me if they would manage me or whatever, but I'm having a conversation with Super Frank, and then he's like, yeah, how would you like to open for Mr. Brown? And I'm like, that's what this is about, like way off of the radar. But part of they had a dilemma a little bit with him. Yeah. In that he had certain rules. That an opening act had to adhere to, because he had this view of what was professional. So if you opened for James Brown, you couldn't wear blue jeans because it's not professional. If you open for James Brown, you can't cuss at his audience because he doesn't want someone coming and cussing at his audience. So your music needed to be clean. But also, you couldn't touch his band's instruments. So if you were a band, it's like you bring your own stuff. My instruments, and like there's not much room to set up for a band. So, they tried a few different things, and they were just having a hard time finding a fitting opening act. So they're like, you want to try this, And so the first show, they like just throw me into the Lion's Den, man. They're like, you're going to open for him at Times Square, New York, the BB King Blues Grill. Right. And I'm like, I remember being backstage. You talking about being nervous. Like I'm backstage myself. My mom flies in for the show. I got an aunt who flies in for the show. I got like homies there. I'm like, yo, I'm opening for James Brown in Times Square, New York. I don't know what I'm doing, And I'm backstage by myself, and I'm talking to the security guard. Like, yo, he's like, man, you look kind of nervous. I was like, dude, I don't know why I'm here. He's like, you must be here for some reason. I'm like, all right. But so I just went out on stage, and instead of the same thing I was talking about earlier, like instead of like, I'm going to tear the roof off, I was like, no, people are here to see James Brown. I'm going to be respectful. So instead of like DJ hit the beat and then I'll come out and bum rush the stage, I just come out on the stage. I got the mic. I'm like, Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Brian Winchester. I go by Braille.
Yeah.
As you can imagine, it's a great honor for me to be here with you this evening, opening for Mr. Brown. I'm going to perform some hip hop music for you. One thing you'll notice, the songs I'm going to perform, they're clean of profanities, ba-da-da-da-da. I hope you enjoy, right? And so by taking that approach, it disarmed the crowd, because sometimes what would happen is, if someone came out too hype and they were opening for James Brown, they didn't read the room, the crowd would turn on them, you know. Or if somebody came and they were like too chill or whatever, you know. One time there was like this singer-songwriter, he was just playing his piano, singing, people threw stuff on stage.
Jeez.
So I think that approach of, hey, as you can imagine, this is a great privilege for me, you know, thank you for your time, da-da-da, it kind of disarmed the crowd to where they're like, all right, we'll check this dude out.
Nice.
And so the management was like, that went really well. The next show you're going to open for him is going to be in Barcelona, Spain. You know, so I'm like, okay. And so before he passed, like I was opening his opening act 2 years before he passed away. Wow. And did like a little over 20 shows with him between Europe and the States. Yeah. Amazing.
Hey, was there just a concern in different genres of music, or was that they assembled it with just different genres and no concern that it was like hip hop and then soul music? I mean, it draws roots, but
yeah, it's still so they wouldn't have me open at the casino shows because they felt like it wouldn't be a good mix. But they would have me open when it was a music venue, you know. Gotcha. And then, you know, in some ways, I think the management, because it's funny, because my career, I think the management thought there was a possibility that, you know, I would have crossover appeal or things like that. I never really did. So I probably didn't take off the way the management thought. So they kind of thought like, yo, if we can bring him up and he's opening for James Brown or whatever. But because what free music, these people want IV. Like my dad passed away in 2000. I can't cater to all these different needs and desires. Like I can just make underground rap music. Like that's what I know how to do. And I don't really aspire to be some famous artist. So as there was like this kind of mounting pressure, like make Shades of Grey Part 2. I'm like, Shades of Grey Part 2. I'm not inspired to make Shades of Grey Part 2. I made Shades of Grey Part 1. And so I think I was in that sense, at first I wasn't a disappointment to the management because I think I did open the shows well, but I think I was a disappointment in the sense that my career just didn't take off. And part of that was I didn't know how to translate myself on a popular level. You know, it's like I was more popular than I felt like I should have been. You know what I mean? Like I'm just this underground, scrappy Christian rapper from Portland. Like I'm not supposed to, you know, chart or anything like that. You know what I mean? And it's maybe in a different life or in a different headspace, I could have made more commercially viable music, but the pressure of trying to do that, it just didn't appeal to me. It was like, I've got too many things pulling, like between my convictions, my preferences, you know, so on and so forth. And again, it's just a different era. And I didn't have a lot of support in regards to people who had been in those shoes before, who could say like, I didn't have like mentors or anything like that. I felt like I was blazing like kind of uncharted territory.
Sure.
By the time I became a dad and stuff, I was like, dude, I'm not gonna just fully give myself over to what is it gonna take for me to be successful in music. In a sense, I'm like, I'm successful enough. I'm content just to maintain the present level of success rather than try and grow it beyond what I could manage.
Yeah, I mean, your music is global, and hey, they really love you out in Japan too. They got Japanese versions of your albums, and did you have the opportunity to tour in Japan too as well? Or
I did a couple times, and you know,
fantastic.
A lot of it, the group I was in, Lightheaded, we were bigger in Japan than I was as a solo artist. But because I was connected to Lightheaded, that also gave me a pull, because Japan, as I mentioned, really had the attraction to more the jazzy early 90s hip hop, really the Tribe Called Quest side of my influence.
That's a great point.
I also had this like aggressive and emotional, you know, again, there were these competing influences.
Hey, just really, really amazing, man. And so Man, I could talk to you for days about music, and maybe I'll just look at schedule another interview. But I want to talk about some of the stuff you do outside real quick, if you don't mind sharing. I know that you're a lead pastor to the Saving Grace Church. And how long have you been doing that?
Yeah, I guess now it would be like 6.5, yeah, 6.5 years
Yeah. Yeah.
since I've been in that role. And part of kind of what happened, you know, I became a believer when I was like 14, but I had like no real discipleship or teaching or anything like that. So I was just like trying not to get in trouble, trying not to do bad things. Um, and whatever that meant to me, it was a very kind of, in some level, subjective, and in some, like, I had a faint knowledge of, okay, these are some of the things that the scriptures talk about. But around 2010, after I went through the period of life where I went through the divorce, I was in this kind of turning point where it's like, either I'm going to kind of fall away from the Lord and just like do my own thing, or I'm going to lean in. And it was, I can't just go on as I have. And so I was like, I'm going to lean in. And in that time of leaning in, and I was a single father at the time as well. So I talk a lot about that on the song Flex, because when everything fell apart, it's like, it's not just me. It's like, dude, I got this 3-year-old girl here. And she kind of like, family members just dipping in every direction. It was just like crazy. It was like, okay, it's me and her. People have left. They went to other places. Even when I would do shows around that time, 2010, 2011, I would have my 3-year-old daughter with me. She'd sit on the stage with the pacifier in her mouth, and I would just do enough shows to pay rent, and I wouldn't do any more. And so that also, these are the things that were affecting like my aspirations. Like, bro, I'm just trying to make it. By make it, not make it, in the industry. I'm just trying to make it like
to survive,
Yeah. And so as I leaned into the Lord, I started sitting under, I would just say, more careful biblical teaching that was walking me through the scriptures, where a lot of times I would even read the Bible like a fortune cookie. I just try and open it up. Like, what do I find? What does this mean for me? But I was never really taught context, how to read things in context, or how the Bible is telling an overall story and how those things fit together. So once I was being taught that, I'm like learning and being like a kind of person where whatever, I said earlier, like if I was into basketball, I wanted to play it. It's the same thing. Once the word was being ministered to me and I was understanding things I hadn't understood, I wanted to share it with other people. So it's just naturally what I started doing. And so even around the time when I made Native Lungs, all of a sudden I'm preaching at my concerts, which I used to just say like, thank you. I want to give praise to my personal Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and dip out. All of a sudden now I'm like preaching at the end of my set, not because it's like something that I think I have to do. It's what I'm compelled to do. And over time, people would say at concerts after that, and then when we did Beautiful Eulogy, people would be like, man, that was really clear. That was really helpful. And instead of that inspiring me to want to do more concerts, I was like, man, I know what it was like to seek to follow the Lord and not really be taught and have nobody really like sit down with you and explain things to you. And I'm like, that doesn't make me want to do more concerts. It kind of makes me want to be a pastor, right? It makes me want to like be in it for the long haul with people. And so that even turns into when I started doing the mix engineering, because part of, in addition to trying to find how to help get a sound, it was like, okay, this is a way I can do music from home without traveling. And so I would mix records, do shows just enough to pay my bills. And then all the rest of my energy was preparation for how could I serve the church better?
Yeah.
Anytime there was an opportunity to preach, if somebody said, hey, you willing to do this? I would just say yes. I'd clear out my schedule. I would do it. And there was a church then, their pastor had passed away. It was a smaller congregation, like about 35 people were still there, mostly elderly. And they just needed some people to preach for them on a few Sundays. So I said, sure, I'll do it. And very shortly, like I started just falling in love with the people. I saw their need for a shepherd. And so I just said, yeah, I'm willing to do this if this is what God wants me to do.
Yeah.
And the church that I was at, we let the congregation know I was planning on going, and like 35 people who were with me over there, like, hey, we'll go with you. And so
awesome.
we just went as a team, and, you know, that was the start right there in 2017. I guess I get it mixed up, man. No, 2017 is when I started preaching there, but 2018 is when I came on as the lead pastor. And that was such a learning curve for me, bro, to go from a full-time musician to like a full-time pastor. So I kind of just said, music, you're like, you're over here while I figure out. And then it was like, if you imagine you start 2018 and then we had the pandemic, 2020.
Oh man.
So now not only I'm a new pastor, I've got the learning curve of that. And now I'm pastoring through kind of an unprecedented situation. Yeah. And so, and then my kids are getting older. Like my daughter, who was 3, you know, I was talking about that story. She's 18 now, man. Right. So she's a senior in high school. Yeah. So it's just, that's what I'm saying, like the various aspects of the deep end of life. Yeah, but it's been an incredible thing, man. I mean, when I was in my music bag, all my friends, even who were believers, it was like we were peers who like both shared the same love for hip hop.
Yeah.
All of a sudden in pastoral ministry, man, it's like I'm developing close relationships with 99-year-olds, you know.
Yeah, sure.
It's like that. It's just it was a learning to communicate to a whole new group,
different populations. Yeah,
different populations, and learning to like genuinely care about, be concerned about, be invested in relationships that most of my life I neglected those kind of relationships. I didn't really have them. You know, all my grandparents passed away when I was fairly young. The one who lasted the longest was my grandma on my mom's side, but still passed away when I was still fairly young. And so, you know, I want to say in my 20s or something like that. But nonetheless, yeah, it was just new, where it's like all of a sudden I got all these grandparents in the Lord. You know, I've got just relationships that I wouldn't have even known how to value them. And I'm learning to value them, and, you know, officiating their funerals when they pass away, you know, like that, where I'm just experiencing a different side of life that was new to me. It's been really beautiful, man, but it's not flashy. It's the day in, day out, the same way music was. You know, it's like people, like, they see the final product, right? But it's like the grind to get there, you know, that's like some of the most, that's some of the most precious aspect of it all, right? Is the grind to get there. And same in pastoral ministry. It's the grind of like really doing life with people, being in the trenches with them. And then when you get to the, you know, the end result or whatever God's been producing through that season, now you like are sharing in that, both the sorrows and the joys, you know.
You know, I saw a lot of the IG post of you talking about the faith on it's the Street Lights Bible IG account that I saw. We're talking about God's word. I just love it. Just, you know, some people need that spirituality, and I love how you offer it. And again, I just go back to one thing you said in your song too. If we want to build our lives on the rock and not the sinking sand, we should use God's word to guide our lives. So I like that, you know, you offer it to people who need it, and just you know, positive role model, man. I love the work that you do. And hey, man, and you even did a pastoral internship program, right, at Capitol Baptist Hill, Washington, D.C. You mentioned you spent some time out there. How long was that program? Was that months long or years? Or
it was 6 months, man. Yeah. So in the period when I was like determining, is pastoral ministry like what I'm going to do? Because when I would be on the road, I was talking about it a lot. And one of my friends, I had never met Mark Dever. I didn't really know him, but one of my friends was talking to him, and they were like, oh yeah, have you heard these guys, Beautiful Eulogy or whatever? And the guy was like, my friend was like, one of those guys, you know, he's been talking about wanting to be a pastor. And so Mark was like, do you think he would do the internship? He's like, I don't know, I'll reach out to him. But the internship, what's really cool about their situation is it's a paid internship in that they provide a place for you to live. and give you a stipend. Now, it's a sacrifice, but nonetheless, the goal is it's a full-time internship where it's like, you know, I didn't even graduate high school and they're giving me a stack of books. Let me keep my hands on the screen, right? It's more than what I can probably fit in the camera. This is a big stack of books and I'm writing papers and I'm observing. This time we just had our third kid, you know, an infant. Then we've got my oldest daughter, you know, who's like now, it was like 8 or something like that. And it's like, okay, well, if we go to DC, they'll take care of us. We'll probably get like a 2-bedroom apartment and we'll just mob. And, you know, so just like I did with music, put everything in storage and go.
Yeah.
I did that to like do this internship. We put everything in storage, went to Washington, DC. And yeah, it was awesome because what I learned from there, I knew preaching was an aspect of pastoral ministry, but I didn't know like, what else do pastors do? What does that look like? What is the Bible? What is the responsibilities that God gives to pastors? And so here I got to watch, observe what faithful men, and I'm like, yeah, man, preaching is just one part of this, you know, but it's not the day in, day out, you know, there's other aspects to it. And that I just fell in love where it's like, yeah, man, this is like laying down your life for other people and helping them to know and follow Jesus. I'm like, yeah, man, that's what I want to commit my life to if that's what God wants me to do. And so having a good model was just so helpful because I wasn't making up in my mind what this needs to look like. I had like examples, you know, before me. So the same way I had role models in music, it was like, now I got role models in ministry, you know, people who did it longer, have done it in such a way where I'm like, yeah, that is a good picture of what faithful ministry I think could look like. And so now I need to figure out how to do it myself because I'm not just going to be a replication of somebody else.
Sure. But your style.
Yeah. My own personality has to come into it because you have to, you know, minister as an authentic human being. You know what I mean? You're not going to be a robot or whatever. But at the same time, there's certain principles and there's certain convictions that I inherited, you know, through rubbing shoulders with people that taught me well. And so, yeah, that was an incredible thing. And yeah, didn't know when that would happen, but after completing the internship 2014, went back home to my local church 2015, 16, 17, and then 2018 is when I stepped into my current role.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, I see you as a community leader, a counselor, and in some senses, you know, family to the people that, you know, you lead and pastors. So amazing. I just wanted to highlight that because I thought that was really well. As we get to the end of this interview, I did quickly want to mention that got into it's a hobby, but you started enjoying to cook with your family. And so, yeah, I love the little tradition that you guys have where, you know, your family picks a country to learn about, cook cuisine during one of your special events with your family members. But hey, man, when did cooking become a thing for you guys? And you know, is it more your wife? Is it you? Who is it?
I mean, my wife gets like the credit for the day in, day out making food. You know, our family's well fed. We rarely ever go to restaurants. There was the backstory. My dad was a chef, and that's how his creativity was expressed, and then mine was music. I had this little stint, I want to say like 2012, where I started messing around with cooking. I started getting inspired, but not like, let me make a quick meal. Let me be in the kitchen the whole day, put together like a whole menu. But then I had to go on a special diet because I had like, you know, intestinal bacterial overgrowth or whatever. It's like, I ain't worried about cooking, man. I'm like literally eating sardines every day, you know, and carrot sticks or whatever. Right. So I took a break from it. Yeah. But yeah, we started experimenting with like, okay, man, I want to put together a menu. It was getting so expensive to go to restaurants.
Yeah, oh, dude.
Birthdays and stuff, you know, like
man.
If I want to take my family of 5 to like a nice restaurant to experience something other than burgers and fries, right? Then it's like
$200.
Yeah, no joke. And I was like, man, we could probably cook something where we can like use top quality ingredients. Yeah. We can develop a menu and we could spend slightly less then that, or even if we spent the same amount, we're going to have leftovers and stuff like that. But definitely in many cases, it's like, all right, we maybe spent $80 on groceries, but if we did this at a restaurant, this would have been like $350 or something like that, you know? So it's like learn new skills. And so we would just pick different themes, different countries. So like for my wife's birthday, we did Lebanese food. And it's like, when I go deep, I'm like, I'll read like 15, 16 recipes, see the similarities, see the differences, to really try and understand what are the spices, what are the techniques.
That's awesome.
For my birthday, we did Indian food. For my daughters, we did Japanese food. We tried different things, and it's been a blast, man. It's been a blast. And then, we'll learn about those places as well. I'll kind of tell my tell the kids about the geography, tell them about, I'll even make contact with the local church in the area and like say, hey, what's life like for you guys right now? How can we pray for you guys? So we'll get, we'll huddle up as a family and we'll actually pray for people from the very country that we're eating the cuisine as well. So it's just been a lot of fun.
Fantastic, man. Well, I enjoy seeing those posts, and I look forward to seeing which country you guys dive into next. Really cool. Hey, well, with that, thank you so much for the opportunity to dig into your music. As mentioned, you're a legend. You're a staple in the rap community. Just a fan of your lyrical content and all the emotion that you put into it. You're an amazing family man, a role model through your church, and just love how you share your life, your music, man. I'm forever a fan. I look forward to just hearing more stuff from you in 2025. But with that, I want to close the interview out with just a couple lighthearted questions, and then I'll turn the floor over to you.
Okay.
So with that, let's do a real easy one. I'm just curious on what kind of sense of humor you have. What is Braille's favorite comedy movie? If not number one, something that kind of communicates your sense of humor.
I'm definitely, one I like a lot is Man on the Moon, the Andy Kaufman.
Oh, yeah. Was that Jim Carrey, right?
Yep, Jim Carrey playing Andy Kaufman.
Okay.
I'm not huge on sarcasm in a lot of cases, but what I love is when someone so becomes a character, and it's I like the kind of jokes where there could be 300 people in the room, but only 5 people get the joke,
Oh, okay.
And like everyone else misses it. I don't know. I've always enjoyed that kind of awkward yet genuine humor. So I enjoy that. Obviously, I enjoy some dad jokes and stuff. But yeah, Man on the Moon, I just found it so fascinating. I'm like, man, this guy was a trip. The line between his gag and his real life just gets totally obscured. Not necessarily as a role model in that sense either, but it's just fascinating how committed he was to his characters and the Tony Clifton and stuff. Yeah, that I find that hilarious.
Nice. Well, we just talked about cooking. What is your favorite food to eat?
Man, I always say like variety is my favorite, bro.
Okay.
But what I've been making in the morning that I'm loving, if you have leftover rice, like a tablespoon of butter, you kind of cook up that rice in like a tablespoon of butter, fry an egg, a little bit of kimchi, a little bit of sauce, sesame oil, and it's Korean. I always say it wrong, man. It's like, I call it gochujang.
Oh, gochujang sauce. Yeah, the hot spicy red one.
Yeah.
Man.
The fermented red pepper, just a little bit. And so just a dollop of that with the kimchi, the soy sauce, sesame oil. I've been doing that for breakfast, and I'm like, I think I can
kimchi fried rice. That sounds good.
Every day. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, is that your favorite thing to cook, or do you have something else that you really enjoy cooking?
Man, for Thanksgiving we made Chinese food, and I did steam buns for the first time.
Oh wow.
And that was so satisfying to, they weren't like, let's say they didn't look like they were made in a factory. They didn't have the smoothest the smoothest tops to them or whatever, but man, the texture was, I was just like, I can't believe like it actually turned out, because I figured like this is going to be a fail, but I'll try it anyway. But they turned out really good. So that was one of my favorite things recently. Yeah, was making the steam buns.
Yeah. Hey, do you have a sweet tooth or not?
So I rarely do like sugar for real. When it comes to sweets, like I actually have an affinity for black licorice. So
wow. Oh, you're one of the small population. That's
yeah,
awesome.
well, because people get it between the red vines or the black. I'm like, no, 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 neither of those are licorice. I'm talking like
straight, huh?
I'm talking about real licorice, which is either going to be, with anise seed oil or actually licorice root. And so, yeah, I love that flavor. I tend to like, favorite food. I forgot to say mole. I made mole from scratch recently. Yeah, so mole is actually my favorite food, just period. I have been into the Korean fried egg breakfast, but mole is my favorite food. I like complex flavors.
Yeah. You have a very diverse palate, man.
Yeah, a bunch of flavors coming together to make something where when I eat it, instead of my brain saying, oh, that's pepper, or oh, that's this, it's like my brain cannot identify what it is because all those flavors have gelled together to create a unique, taste.
Yeah.
And so I love things like mole. But yeah, I do have a sweet tooth, but I don't really obey it, put it that way, So I only use maple syrup or raw honey to sweeten things now. I don't really use sugar.
Well, I guess two things. One, at some point, I'm going to have to introduce you to Filipino food or try to get that in there in your table.
Bro, what is it? My brother has been going to the Philippines a lot lately, and he's all about the
tocino.
Tocino.
Yeah, the marinated
like
meat.
The pork. Yeah. So I'm probably going to do some research and try and cook that for him sometime coming up.
Fantastic. And the second point I wanted to bring up, if you were ever at one point into donuts, is it Voodoo Donuts? Voodoo Donuts? I think it's Blue Star is the other one that's prominent out there, right?
Yeah. Out of Blue Star or Voodoo, I would definitely do Blue Star.
Okay.
The truth is, so I'm going to be on the more bougie side, and really, by bougie, I would just say high quality ingredients, right? Okay. So with Voodoo, it's like you're crumbling up Oreo cookies. That's cool, but I don't really rock with Oreo cookies alone, nor do I rock, or you're crumbling up Captain Crunch. Like, I don't really rock with Captain Crunch like that. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to stay away from the food coloring and from the high fructose corn syrup and all that. So I think Blue Star is going to be more higher quality ingredients. Voodoo gets props for putting Portland on the map when it comes to donuts. Yeah. Probably my favorite donuts, though, in Portland, there's a spot called Pips, and they got these mini donuts.
Pips? Okay.
Yeah, Pips. And so they do the mini donuts and like seasonal flavors and, make their own, various toppings and stuff. And so Pips is a treat, man.
I'm gonna have to try it. I'm due for a work trip out in Portland in March, so Pips will be on that stop, man. So great. Thanks for the recommendation. I'll go there with
you. Hit me up.
Oh, I will.
Yeah.
I will. Well, hey, man. Hey, brother. Again, it was an honor to speak with you, man. Again, I could talk your ear off, and I went longer than I wanted to because I wanted to respect your time, but I was just too deep into it. But hey, brother, Happy New Year. Are there any special projects that you want to tell folks about? Or do you want to share, best place to find your music? And please close the interview out with some final words.
Okay, man. Sweet. Yeah. Well, anyway, yeah, I wasn't in a rush, man. I just enjoy chatting and, that's just how I communicate. So for better or for worse, hopefully people enjoy it. But I have a website, gospelbanquet.com, and that's kind of the hub for the physical products that I'm printing. So the next is the Kept Safe. My aspiration is that this year will be really productive with music. Whether or not that actually happens, we'll see. I wanted last year to be productive, and it was, in the sense that it's the most productive I've been in a long time. Awesome. But I probably only released like 6 or 7 songs. I mean, this year I would like to release, 2 or 3 projects. So I've got a lot that I've been accumulating in terms of production, ideas, things like that. But I'd like to see this year be the year of execution. And I feel more, I think some of the exploring my back catalog has just put me like more in tune with myself as an artist, where it's like, I know myself as a person, but it's like translating that as an artist when you're in such a new season. It's like, I got to almost like reacquaint myself with myself as an artist, and so that's been fun. But so that's some of my goal this year. And yeah, I'm easy to find. Most social media, it's just Brian Braille, Bryan. Braille. So I put my real name in there for fun. Everything used to be Braille Hip Hop was my my handle on everything, but eventually I changed it to Brian Braille because then it can I can be in the multiple spaces at once. So yeah.
Fantastic.
No specific closing words, man. It's this is fun. I haven't done an interview in a while.
No, thank you, man.
Research that you did,
yeah.
And it's fun chatting about it.
So thank you again, and I look forward to getting this out.
All right, man. Appreciate it, bro.